Hi everyone, welcome back. With starting off with week 6. You're going to have 2 videos to watch this week, as well as 2 assignments to complete, and they are going to focus on the 2000s after 9/11. So from October of 2001 all the way through to the end of 2009. And to start us off, we are going to jump right in with almost 1 month after the September 11th attacks. On October 7th, 2001, we invaded Afghanistan. So this invasion occurred immediately after the attacks on 9/11 in an effort to dismantle al-Qaeda and to remove the Taliban from power. The war is still ongoing today. This makes it the longest war in U.S. history. It reached its 18th anniversary in the fall of 2019 and is coming up on its 19th anniversary this fall. So in this war, we invaded Afghanistan to attack the Taliban. Who were the Taliban? Well, the Taliban, if you remember, they took power in Afghanistan after the USSR left. So they left in 1989, and the Taliban slowly took power and ruled officially as the government in Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001. The Taliban are radical Muslims from the Pashtun ethnic background. When the U.S. was attacked on September 11th, we learned that the Taliban had been harboring terrorists and had been harboring members of al-Qaeda and working with them. And so we attacked in October of 2001. By December of 2001, the Taliban was gone. They had been removed from power, but they were only gone from Afghanistan. They had escaped to Pakistan. Pakistan was accused of continuing to support the Taliban. They denied it. They continue to deny it today. However, Pakistan is working to support them, allowing them to take harbor along the Pakistani border in an effort to avoid the United States Army. The Taliban continues today to attack both Afghan civilians and the U.S. Army. There have been many different attempts at peace talks. We'll talk a little bit more about those when we get to more recent years, in the last couple of years. But the Taliban is continuing to attack, and that has pushed peace talks further down the line. In response to the September 11th attacks and the 2001 anthrax attacks, Congress passed legislation to strengthen national security. Known as the USA PATRIOT Act, the legislation is officially titled Uniting and Strengthening America by Providing Appropriate Tools Required to Intercept and Obstruct Terrorism, Act of 2001. So the USA Patriot is the acronym for that very long title. This legislation has proven to be very divisive. It created new rules for surveillance and for national security. And while some people believe that it makes us safer to have the government being able to use these new rules, many others believe that it violates Americans' constitutional rights. So it is in many ways a question of how far are people willing to go? How much of their constitutional rights are they willing to give up in the name of safety? Then in November of 2001, China was allowed entrance into the WTO. Remember, that's the World Trade Organization. Beginning in 2000, there had been a significant reduction of poverty in China. And then in December of 2001, China was admitted into the World Trade Organization because it reduced taxes, allowed for more open trade, and set forth some more globally minded industrial policies. And all of this allowed China to become a more global trading partner. Then in January of 2002, the Guantanamo Bay detention camp was opened. This is a United States military prison located within the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base in Cuba. The Guantanamo Bay Naval Base is a U.S. military base that is in Cuba. We have leased it since 1903. We officially won it in the Treaty of Paris to end the war against Spain for Cuban independence. We have had a lease on that US military base ever since then. So it's been 100 and almost 17 years, about 117 years at this point. So the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base was opened during the Bush administration's fight against the war on terror in 2002. The operations of the camp are generally considered to be a major breach of human rights by many in the global community. Obama promised to close it when he was president, but he was met with bipartisan, so both Republican and Democrat opposition to do so. He did reduce the number of inmates from 245 to only 41. Then in January of 2018, Donald Trump, as president, signed an order to keep the detention camp open indefinitely. However, he did reduce the inmate number as well from 41 inmates to 40 of them. So, he did reduce that by one there, but he signed an order to make sure to keep the base open indefinitely. He wants to make sure that it is never closed down. Then in July of 2002, the AU was launched. This is the African Union. It is a continental union. It was founded originally in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So it was founded in May of 2001 and then officially launched in July of 2002 in South Africa. So you will notice on this map, much of it, almost the entirety, in fact, of the continent of Africa is a part of it and are active members. However, Sudan has been suspended as a member for many of its issues with violence, but specifically over its violence against protesters. There are in total 55 member states. The current chair is Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. He is also the president of Egypt right now. Each chair takes a one-year term, and it rotates through the 5 different regions that Africa was split into. Then in December of 2002, we start to see a further increase in tension between the United States and Iran. So in 2002, satellite images showed that Iran had secret nuclear plants, and we accused them of using nuclear energy to build weapons of mass destruction, to build nuclear weapons. So you can have nuclear power plants and use them for nuclear energy, but you can also have nuclear power plants and use that nuclear energy for nuclear weapons. And so we believe that they were using them for nuclear weapons because they were keeping them secret. So tensions with Iran have begun to increase at this point, and they only increase more as time goes on. Then on February 1st, 2003, we see the second fatal accident in the Space Shuttle program occur when the Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrated during its atmospheric entry. It was coming back after it had been in space, and as it returned into the atmosphere, it broke apart, it disintegrated, and killed all 7 crew members aboard. As I said, it was the second fatal accident in the Space Shuttle program after the Challenger, which broke apart 73 seconds after liftoff and had killed the 7-member crew in 1986. At this point, Space Shuttle flights were suspended for 2 years after this happened, and the debris from this disintegration during re-entry fell over a very wide space over Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas. Just as the Challenger was filmed live as it blew up after takeoff, in that same way, many people were watching the Space Shuttle Columbia as it re-entered, and many people watched live as it also had this major accident, and the crew members were unfortunately unable to make it, to solve the problem, and all 7 crew members were killed. There are many different videos on YouTube. This one here, This Day in History, Space Shuttle Columbia, I highly recommend it. It is a very good video to watch. Since 2003, Approximately 500,000 Darfuri men, women, and children have been killed. This is known as the Genocide in Darfur. In 2011, South Sudan became an independent country. Since then, they've been experiencing an ongoing civil war. And since 2013, we've seen violence increase in that region, and still there is violence against the people of Darfur. You'll see here on this map, it is the region to the west in Sudan. They have been experiencing a lot of ethnic violence, and that killing has been called a genocide by the international community. In 2003, the Cuban government led a crackdown on Cuban dissidents, those speaking out against the government. At that point, the government imprisoned 75 people in what is known as the Black Spring. Those 75 people included 29 journalists, as well as librarians, human rights activists, and democracy activists, all on the basis that they were acting as agents of the United States by accepting aid from the United States government. The crackdown began on March 18th, and it lasted for 2 days, so from March 18th to March 20th. And it was coordinated with the invasion of Iraq by the United States. The United States was very public about the fact that in 2003 they were invading Iraq in that March, and the Cuban government purposely planned this to coincide with that to avoid publicity. And at that same time, on March 20th, 2003, the invasion of Iraq was led by the United States alongside the United Kingdom and other countries. Troops from the United States, the UK, Australia, and Poland all invaded in the spring of 2003. 36 other countries were involved in its aftermath. Why did we invade Iraq? Well, we invaded because Saddam Hussein, who had been the leader of Iraq, denied the United Nations access to inspect chemical weapons sites in the early 2000s. The United States and Britain both believed that he had weapons of mass destruction, that he had nuclear and chemical weapons. And so we invaded to end Saddam's rule and to get these weapons of mass destruction out of his hands. Well, we invaded and captured Saddam within just 9 months. By December of 2003, he had been captured. He was then put to trial and found guilty of crimes against humanity. He was then later put to death for those crimes. However, the Iraq War continued, lasting from 2003 until 2011. Once the United States finally left, crime and violence spiked between the two major Muslim groups that are there, the Sunni and Shia Muslims. And this vacuum of power and this violence and this spike between them allowed space for ISIS to grow and to take over area within Iraq and then later Syria as well. Then in December of 2004, December 26th, just the day after Christmas, we see one of the deadliest disasters in modern history occur. An Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami left about 230,000 people dead. Casualties ranged all the way from East Asia to South Africa. So if you see here on this map, the epicenter right here in the northern part, Indonesia, and people felt the effects, and there were deaths because of those effects all the way towards South Africa. So very far effects felt because of this natural disaster. Then in April of 2005, Pope John Paul II died. Pope John Paul II had been a very popular pope. He was the second longest serving pope in modern history, and he worked to improve the church's relationship with Judaism, with Islam, and with the Eastern Orthodox Church. He had been the sovereign and the head of the Catholic Church in the Vatican City State from 1978 until his death in 2005. So for 27 years, he ruled over the Catholic Church and the Vatican City State. Finally, in February of 2005, the Second Intifada came to an end. I mentioned this when we spoke about the Intifada, when I spoke about the Intifada in the last set of PowerPoint slides, but it did come to an end in 2005. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, who later became president, had become president after Arafat's death in 2004, and Israel Prime Minister Ariel Sharon they came to an agreement that the Palestinian factions would stop all acts of violence against Israelis, while Israel would cease its military activity against all Palestinians. Both sides reaffirmed their commitment to peace, and Ariel Sharon agreed to release 900 Palestinian prisoners and to withdraw from the West Bank towns. At this point, suicide bombings did significantly decrease, but violence continued, and it continues to this day. Connected with this, part of that withdrawal from the West Bank towns, Israel did remove its settlements from Gaza. So the decades, not centuries, old Palestinian conflict saw further movement when Israel left Gaza, which is that, as you see here on this map here, is the small region of land here, Gaza Strip, a little bit larger blown up for you here. Israel had control of that region, and in August of 2005, left the region, which did unfortunately allow for Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, to take control of the territory. Today, Hamas, using Gaza, continues to work to attack Israel and try to hurt Israel by bombing it and trying to attack it in other ways as much as it can. You are going to be working on a reading about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, looking into it a bit further. Ask you to put the information you see into a chart, just summarizing it, and then you'll answer some questions explaining to me which side you take and why you take that side, who you think is right, or what you think the compromise should be if you think both are right or both are wrong. So you'll do that and turn that in, and then you can check into the next video to watch and learn about the end of the 2000.